Hey, check it out, it's Jan, 1/3 of MediaShinobi, and today we're going to be reviewing episode 4 of Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress entitled Flowing Blood. So this episode starts off right where the last episode ended. It was a cliffhanger where Ikoma was about to bite Ayame, and the pregnant woman actually just turned right there at the spot. Ikoma did not bite Ayame, he was actually stopped at the last minute by Ayame's bodyguard. And in regards to the pregnant woman, she was dealt with immediately by Mume. However, this put Ikoma and Mume in a very, very difficult position. All of that effort to gain their trust from the last episode, thrown out the window. It got to the point where the entire group wanted to sever ties with them and kind of leave them stranded because they wanted to pretty much separate the last train cart because that's where they kept them. But last minute, that's where they've been rushed by like hundreds of Kabanes. Pretty much the back train carts were slaughtered. This is where Ikoma and Mume moved their way up so they could catch up with the other group. And it was only until then where they finally reached a mutual understanding. Ayame decided to give her blood to Ikoma in exchange for Ikoma kicking that Wazatori's ass. And the episode actually ends in a happy note. You know, they are looking in the distance as the train now continues on to their destination. And that pretty much wraps up the entire summary of this episode. I mean, for the most part, I thought it was good. It was a very solid episode. Animation, soundtrack, amazing, on point. It also felt like the end of an arc. You know, we kind of got some resolution between the animosity between the majority of the group and, you know, Ikoma, Mume, and by association, you know, their friends. And with this, they could finally continue on to their destination, which is Kondo Taku. But this also presents a new question. Where do we go from here? I think this is the perfect time for them to switch gears, and I feel like we're finally at that end point because now we could progress further with the plot. And that's why I mentioned this was a pivotal point, because if they continued on that route, don't get me wrong, I'm still enjoying the series, but I feel like I would eventually get kind of bored. They need to keep it fresh, and that's where this new location, their destination, will come into play, because now we're presented with a new environment, and this is where they could really present new aspects to the series. I also think this is where the plot is going to get a little bit more complicated. I really hope there's more to this than just running away from Kabanes. I think there would be a total of 3 major possibilities of what will happen when they reach Kondo Taku. The first scenario is that the city is in shambles. There is no sign of humanity left, and the Kabane has already pretty much taken over the entire city. Now, the second scenario would be the complete opposite, where it is untouched. The Kabane did not infiltrate the city, or were unable to, and we still have pretty much 100% of humanity left intact. And the third scenario is pretty much the middle ground between the first 2 scenarios that I provided. And if I were to give a prediction, I would completely omit the first one. I feel like the first one is too much of a cop-out. I feel like it's too anticlimactic and simple. In terms of the second and third scenario, honestly, I think it's pretty even. The second scenario, I think that would be interesting depending on how they do it. The very idea that a city is left untouched, that it hasn't been infiltrated by the Kabane yet, either one, they are fully equipped and they're able to deal with that, or they're hiding something, because that would be throwing out signals to me saying that this is a pretty sketchy area and there's more to it than meets the eye. And the reason I would go with that one is because it would make the plot a little bit more interesting. It would take a different route from what we're given so far, which is just on the run. And as for the third scenario, I could definitely see that happening. This would also kind of kick things into a new gear, where they thought it was over with the train scenario, but now that they've reached the destination, in order to save whatever's left, whether it's fellow humans or perhaps new information they could acquire in that location, in order to acquire all that, they have to deal with the Kabanes that are currently there. But those are pretty much the 3 main ones that I could kind of narrow it down, because All the other possibilities I could think of off the top of my head are kind of like variations of those three. In regards to the virus, I'm still curious as to the origin. It just kind of came out of nowhere. You know, the first episode you were just thrust into this plot where you're kind of being carried by its pacing. If I had to throw out theories, I'm gonna say it is artificial. The fact that they have armor to protect their weakness, unless nature is just trying to laugh at you, I'm pretty sure that was intentional. It's too convenient plot-wise if it was natural. The fact that we're seeing different tiers of Kabanes now, you know, we were introduced to the Kabane, we were then introduced to the Kabaneri, which is a hybrid between typical Kabane, but it still retains the mental state and the heart of a human. And then now we've been introduced to the Wazatori, which is just a higher tiered Kabane that has fighting experience. So that to me is a little vague. This could extend onto different types of weapons. So far we saw Wazatori as a samurai. What's stopping a Wazatori from learning how to use guns? If they know how to use guns, then at that point I'll be like, well, that's just not fair. They never really explained how a Wazatori comes to be. Is it natural? Is it a Kabane that's just watching humans and then kind of learning their fighting style? And then we also have the Kabaneri. We don't know how that even happens. I mean, with freaking Ikoma, that was just kind of an accident. He just managed to stop it before it completely affected him. But we also have Mume, and you know, from the very beginning, she already knew she was a Kabaneri, but we don't know her backstory just yet. So we're gonna have to figure that out as new episodes come out. And maybe this might even tie in with the idea of scientists that Ikoma was mentioning earlier. I don't know if it was episode 3 or episode 2, but he was mentioning that there were scientists already in Kongo Koku who were dealing with the Kabanes, you know, experimenting with them. But that also raises the question, I mean, if there's a good side of science where they're trying to figure out how to stop this, there's also the bad side where they could try to play God and experiment on them to kind of create bioweapons. And that's just thoughts that are currently crossing my mind, you know. I could be completely wrong, but that's not the point. This is about sparking interest. This is generating new ideas. Where is this plot going? With that being said, that pretty much ends this review. So if you guys liked it, go ahead and like it. Comment down below. I would love to hear what you guys are thinking about right now. Your theories, what you like, dislike. Subscribe if you want to. We try to pump out this kind of content as much as we can. We're back on our weekly grind. We're coming out with reviews every Friday for this series, Kabane of the Iron Fortress. Don't forget to check out our social media sites as well. Facebook, Google+, Twitter. We just recently acquired Twitter, so if you want to stay up to date in regards to the activities that MediaShinobi is doing, go ahead and check us out there. Tumblr, by the time this is released, Chris will have also released his written review on this episode as well on Tumblr. Other than that, that pretty much wraps up this video. This is Jan, 1/3 of MediaShinobi, signing out.